Welcome to Hot Topics on the Edge of Show. I'm January Jones with my co-host Richard Carthon.
Coming up, Bitcoin reserves race, Coinbase bank play, and new SEC bus. This is another production of The Edge of Company, a rapidly growing media ecosystem empowering the pioneers of Web3 technology, culture, and innovation. Let's dive in.
All right, well, we're taking it back to the States. We've mentioned this as it's been coming along over the last few months, but now this is really heating up, and that is the race for Bitcoin reserves for states. So currently, 28 US states have proposed bills to create a state Bitcoin reserve, and 18 are actively advancing. 15 are reaching House committees. So Utah and Arizona are leading the way. And how many will get through, we'll see. But it is such a microcosm of what's happening in the United States at the federal level and what we're seeing with other countries. But we're still in the same kind of predicament in that to have a Bitcoin reserve, you actually have to change the laws that are already existing. So you can't put the horse before the cart in that sense. So states must pass legislation that authorize digital holdings and often amend existing laws that restrict public funds to traditional investments like bonds, cash, or gold in the case of the United States. So, Richard, what are you thinking about this as far as what you're seeing from your perspective of this move for states to try to maybe beat the US and getting their Bitcoin reserve together?
Yeah, I think this is a very bullish moment that we're seeing, and looks like the broader US is really incorporating this. As you mentioned at the top of this, is that the fact that there's 28 states, that's more than half of our 50 states that we have over here in the US, making these types of bills for Bitcoin reserves, I think is an extremely bullish sign for not just the entire crypto industry, but of course, Bitcoin itself. At the time of this recording, Bitcoin's up 10% in the last over the last week. It's gone from 85K up to 93K. A lot of this is speculated to be that because of everything that's happening with the tariff wars and the traditional markets honestly not doing that great and Bitcoin going up, this for the first time in a while, it's decoupling from traditional markets, Bitcoin, that is. And you're seeing more and more news of a lot of different companies, institutions, states, countries really looking to diversify their own portfolios, and they're really banking on Bitcoin in a lot of ways. So I think this is a really, like I said, bullish in the indication for where things are headed. And also just want to bring up a couple of like states like Texas and Utah, which are going extremely crypto friendly because they're baking in Bitcoin into their treasuries. If like states themselves, not just the US, that states start holding BTC, this is going to cause even more potential financial shifts away from the US reserves. The other thing that happened in the last week is that the US dollar has become its weakest that it's seen in years. It got down to, I think, like 97, which is the lowest it's been in an extremely long amount of time. So when US cash starts becoming weaker, you look for other places to diversify, which gold itself, physical gold, has gone to its highest valuation in history. And also, again, that's why I think you're starting to see Bitcoin surge in the last weeks. All that to say, I think this is the beginning of what will be a trend that you see all throughout the US. But I'm sure, January, you have some other really cool facts about some of these states that are doing some things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to highlight the approaches that the states are taking. And also, like, we know our states, right? So, Kentucky is one of the poorest states in the country. Not a lot of industry there, not income. And but they are the first state to officially enshrine legal protections for Bitcoin users. That has been signed into law. And notably, too, in Kentucky, is that they have called out protection for the operation of Bitcoin nodes to maintain the network. And so that's something that, I guess maybe are they behind the time to think that they can still be mining and doing nodes in Kentucky and that's not going to be outsourced to somewhere else in the world?
Well, one of the biggest things in energy right now, there's a race for energy providing just to your regular grids, energy for AI, and energy for Bitcoin mining. And so they are really trying to incentivize Bitcoin miners to continue to bring their business over to Kentucky. So they're really trying to cover all the bases, which is, I think, really pretty cool.
Right, they've gone from coal, mining coal to Bitcoin. It is a turnaround, yeah. I think the other places, a couple of the other states are setting up some mandatory. So they're saying that they're going to invest 10% of state funds into digital products. And so this is a major turn that's happening. And we'll see how this plays out at the local level, though, because I think the interesting part is when it's playing out in your state Capitol building, right? There's a lot more room for discussion and voices if people know how to get involved. And so taking this discussion now to the state level, then you're involving so many more advocacy groups and consumer protection issues, right? Because a lot of times these consumer protection issues land with the states, and we're seeing some of those issues come up in the legislation that are looking at different kind of crypto reserves.
Yeah. And just one more thing I'd bring up just for fun, like the creative ways that some of these states are proposing bills. For example, in Maryland, I found a creative funding mechanism that establishes Bitcoin Reserve funded through proceeds from gambling violations. So for all you gamblers out there and you violate, basically the money that is made from those violations are going towards purchasing Bitcoin, which is pretty wild.
Oh, yes, like to gambling. To gambling, but it makes sense. All right, well, let's move on. So we are just talking about this on the show all the time, which is just this mainstream adoption. So now we're hearing about these major crypto companies that are looking at eyeing banking licenses in the US. So it's been reported that Coinbase, Circle, Paxos, and BitGo are all considering getting US banking licenses. There's lots of reasons for this, but one of the reasons that it's been tied to the recent legislation for stablecoins, because stablecoin issuers have to be federally or state chartered to be able to issue those. So, Richard, it is a bigger picture with this, but if we see Coinbase become a bank, is this the antithesis of why people got into crypto 8 years ago?
I think there's two ways of looking at this. The short answer is no. When you go from a purist reason for Web3, decentralization, you're trying to get away from the traditional ways and having bottlenecks that can cut you off if they want to. Whereas in a decentralized economy, you are empowered and you can do a lot more with what you personally own. In the broadest sense, to answer your question, no. But overall, from an adoption standpoint, I think this is great because your everyday person, the majority of people who are entering the Web3 space are not here purely for the decentralization. From like a purist standpoint, like they're not just here for that capability; they're here for the practicality of being able to do finance. I just want to stick with Coinbase for a second and how they're approaching this. So right now, and I personally, full disclaimer, I use Coinbase for one of my crypto exchanges. So for me to purchase crypto, I have to attach my personal bank account to Coinbase. Then once the money hits in Coinbase, I then have to convert that cash into whatever cryptocurrency I want to buy. And then let's say that I am ready to now sell that crypto and put it back in my bank. I basically have to sell on Coinbase. Once it's in cash, then I have to send it to my bank. All of this, several steps, and you lose money through all the transactions. If Coinbase is the bank, I literally now, instead of having to go online and do all these steps, can go to my local Coinbase bank, go straight in there and say, I want to buy $100 of Bitcoin. And now whatever, like that's that, right? And so it's making the process way faster. It's making the adoption and the ability to purchase crypto way easier. But then because of being a FDIC insured bank, that helps a lot too. But what I think a lot of people aren't realizing about that though is it's only going to relate to the stable coins, just like you said. So although you might have, let's say, $100,000 in Bitcoin, I don't know that will be insured. It's in USDC. It will because it has to be because the USDC is a digital one-to-one conversion of the US dollar. So they have to be able to prove that they have that liquid cash on the books, even though it's digital. So I think from an onboarding user standpoint, this is great and great first steps. And I think allows for more money to flow into all crypto. From a purist, is this defeating the point of decentralization? Yes.
Right. I guess so. We're going to just see this new kind of cleaving of the industry, right? Coinbase is going to become like Bank of America, right? And then the other coins and exchanges that don't go this route, they're going to become our credit unions, if you want to make that analogy. But it is pretty interesting. And it does speak to why there's just so much influence happening in Washington to get these regulations through. The industry has always been the crypto world is always quick to respond, right? And so now, as quick as laws are changing, the industry is reacting and being like, okay, we're ready for this. And maybe we told you what to do about this too, through the close relationships that happen to move that policy forward. But again, I think stable coins are just going to be on everyone's tongue right now, right? And we're going to see this race that everyone's trying to get their stablecoin to be the one, where a year ago, pretty much there was only one that everyone was using. And to see this turn around so quickly is pretty substantial. But we will see what happens with this, because the benefits are that security, the deposit insurance, right? And these, if they get a banking license, they can also lend, right? And so that is a whole other bag of worms. But the risks too are that, do we trust our regulatory system to watch them and do those protections? And relatedly, we're moving into talking about one of the next stories, which is getting a new SEC chairman over there. So Paul Atkins has been sworn in. And so what that organization does is going to have such a big influence on how these stable coins and these crypto companies becoming banks actually get regulated. So Atkins was a commissioner in the early 2000s. He's been an advocate for best practices. He's a favored guy of the industry. And I don't know, I think it's good coming in, but like thinking of him coming in, I just start feeling bad for how bad Gary got it when he was in there. Because
Yeah.
man, everyone just really was so anti Gary, and he just became like this kind of unification point, right? Like, oh, we can all hate Gary, right? So, Richard, now that we're not all hating someone at the SEC, where's all that unified sentiment coming as far as like the SEC being a leader now to help show the way with what is going to be possible as it moves through legislation, right? Because now we've got everybody involved.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You mentioned the history of Paul Atkins, and basically, he was appointed back in 2002 to 2008, back when President Bush was there. And during his tenure, he was a big advocate for transparency, consistency, and cost benefit analysis at the agency. And obviously, what eventually happened, and when the last recession happened, he was around. And I would need to double check to see if he left right before that happened or while it was happening. But regardless, he has experience in this, and I think with change comes good and bad, right? And obviously, being appointed by a new incumbent president, you have a loyalty to not only serve the U.S. but to also help the person who put you in that position. So I am curious to see how that's going to pan out, but I think it will be very pro crypto and will be a lot more streamlined in how they approach who to go after and why different companies are going to be sought after for different things that could go wrong. So, for example, XRP Ripple, they finally got their whole thing done, and that took years. I think the SEC that we announced a couple of weeks ago are being a lot more streamlined with how they are choosing who they're going after and why. But just having that clarity helps with all of the larger players and institutions that want to come into the space and how to play the game. But just going back to Coinbase and going to that for a moment, the reason why I think that's cool, even with Circle and Paxos and some of these other institutions doing this, by having the first company to finally convert and do the full thing, that gives a clear guideline for all these other companies that potentially want to do the same thing. So now, yes, although Coinbase might be a first mover, JP Morgan Chase can look at this, Bank of America can look at this, all these other players can look at this and be like, oh, cool. Well, we see how they did it. Now we legally know how to do it too. Do we want to even play in this game? And so now that invites even more people to come into this space. Getting all the way back to like, what does I think this mean for the SEC? Overall, I'm just speaking from the Web3 standpoint and the crypto standpoint. I think things are going to be way more favorable towards all things crypto. And I think this appointment will be good as it relates to that. And let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I would hope that the move would push it more towards the SEC setting regulations versus litigating it case by case, right? And then crypto companies have to figure out, well, what is the law based on who got sued for what, when, and how they got out of it. And so that's what everybody has wanted. And we are seeing that whole shift right now with crypto rules. It's going to the legislation in the House and the Senate at the federal level. And then we're also seeing that at the states, like we talked about today, too. And so this is marking the SEC has a new strategy so they can set the regulations, and then who do they go after for enforcement, right? It's going to be actually more of the telling piece of what their strategy is going to be, right? Like who they're suing when. Are they going to like just really try to go after consumer fraud, right? And go for this, we're protecting consumers. Because if these exchanges and other companies now are going through other processes for federal licensing and being legitimized, so what is left in the purview of the SEC when it comes to crypto to complete their mission and what they're supposed to be doing to generally protect the finances of the United States, but also like there's a level of consumer protection that they're also charged with that maybe they go around the way to get to as far as that overview goes.
All right, and that's going to wrap up today's episode of the Edge of Show. We dove into the U.S. states racing to stockpile Bitcoin. We broke down Coinbase's bold consideration of U.S. banking license, and we rounded out with Paul Atkins stepping in as the new SEC chairman. Join us for the conversation on social and let us know your thoughts and comments.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's journey through the hottest Web3 topics. We're thrilled to explore these innovations with you and can't wait to bring even more exciting updates and conversation next week. I'm January here with Richard signing off. Stay curious, stay innovative, and we'll see you next time.